The number one cause of failures of assignments is the spouses. So if that person finds a job, if that person is able to make friends, so this is the first thing I can tell you that they struggle the most in their personal life. It's not about only taking a decision, okay, that person is important for that role. You need to understand that person's personality as well to see if it's someone that will fit, if it has this global mobility intelligence, as we say, to be adjusted in a different country.
Hello and welcome to Brazil is Not for Beginners. Today my guest is Débora Maria. She is an operations manager at LARM Brazil and is a relocation expert. And we are really excited to learn about how people move to Brazil today. Débora, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Isaac. For me, it's a really nice opportunity to be here. And I'm really happy to share a little bit about my daily life with you guys.
So I was a person that was moved to Brazil back in 2013 when I first lived in Brazil. And so I'm really excited about the inner workings of this. I actually just renewed my RNM and did it on my own this time. So really excited to learn the tricks of the trade. Brazil is a complicated place when you're dealing with things like visas and work permissions and all of these other things that you deal with on a regular basis. But maybe before we start getting into that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and how you came to do this type of work.
Okay. Actually, I end up doing this as a coincidence of life. It was never planned. When I was studying business, I start always working with human resources. And then I felt that I wanted to have an opportunity to live abroad. So I planned a trip to go to the US and study English. And then while I was waiting for the trip, I had a chance to go and work for a while in a relocation consultant. So I start dealing with expat as a coincidence of life, like for a certain period, for a couple of months prior my trip. So I went to the US, stayed there for 2 years. And when I get back, I said, okay, let me look for a job. And I liked when I had this couple of months touch with relocation, with expats and everything. And after living abroad, so I started searching for a job opportunity. And then I found LARM. And then I've been working for LARM since 2011. So it's a long time that I'm working with expats and having this opportunity to deal with people from all over the world and different cultures, which has been an amazing experience for me.
I'm sure you have lots of stories, and no 2 days are ever alike. I think that Brazil is well known for things seeming easy and then complexities popping up and things happening there. But I want to hear about these types of stories and the exciting things and the complications. But maybe we can just start with how should it work? So can you walk me through the process if you're explaining this to a person or to a client, right? So I imagine you deal both with individuals and companies. What is the process that they have to prepare for when they move to Brazil? What do they need to do? What are the obvious things they need to prepare for, and maybe some of the less obvious things? And I'm sure we're going to have lots of follow-up questions based on that.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing is the immigration process, because usually when I have a call, I understand like a company contact us, okay, I have this person that I want to be working in Brazil in 1 month. Okay, we need to say, stop. We need to understand what this person is going to do in Brazil. What is the job title? What the job position, the description of the activities. We need to understand that to see if that person will be entitled to be working in Brazil, because we have some specific type of visas that we can apply, and then we need to fit what the company want that person to do and what the country offers as possibilities of visa. So this is the first step, to understand that, and then after that we will start working on all the documents that the person need to come. And it's not going to be in 1 month and 2 months. Usually it takes around 6 months, I can tell you, for that person to have all the documents ready, to get the visa applied, get an approval, enter the country, and have everything set up. So it's a long process when you want to be here and work. So it's not so easy and not so simple as well.
I can say just on that note that when I moved here in 2013, married to a Brazilian, hired by a local consulting company, it still took, I think, 4 or 5 months to do everything so that I could come to Brazil, which was shocking to me. But I guess maybe things have not improved tremendously since then. And there's a lot of paperwork. And the other thing is, I don't know how much you get into the details of the KINAIs and things. It seems that a lot is related to the education. When we moved back to Brazil a few years ago, when we were looking for healthcare plans, which I'm sure you'll get into health insurance and things like that, they asked me for my college degree because they wanted to know what I was trained as, because then it ties back to what syndicate am I part of, an association, and where do I get my benefits. And sorry for that aside, but I feel the pain that you just explained there.
And no, exactly, exactly. Because depending on the type of visa that you are applying, you need to prove that or you have a certain amount of years of experience in that specific position, or you have a certain degree for you to apply for that. So it's not as simple as we think about, like, okay, I want to move to Brazil. No, we need to think about it and all the process and all the documents. And when we start working on the documents for you to immigrate to Brazil, you need to do the legalization, the apostille of birth certificates, diplomas. We have people that, okay, I was born in the US, but I graduated in Spain. But then I got married in Thailand. So you need to collect all the documents from each country of issuance and apostille and legalize, and that takes time. And I can tell you, the 6 months sometimes can go to a year, depending on the person and the situation. So this is the first part, that it's not so simple,
Yeah.
but okay, we are here to help. This is why my function and the company is here to assist with. And the second part, that it's a more corporate, it's about the financial aspects, because the company, they need to do kind of cost of living comparison about home country and host country, to understand the cost of that assignee, as we say, to try to keep the same lifestyle in Brazil. So this is important to discuss inside the company and for them to prepare, like financially speaking. And then the third part, which I can tell you that I'm not the expert, but I know this is the nightmare also with the immigration process when we talk about taxes. They need to understand, like, where are you coming from? If you will need, you have any exception about taxes, the ones that you will pay, if you need to pay it in the home country, in the host country, in both countries. I know that this is a more bureaucratical process, but it's important to discuss to avoid any problems when you need to do the declaration of your salary and everything in Brazil.
Yeah, that's a scary one. That the taxes are a scary one. I will be completely transparent that I largely keep my head in the sand and just hope that nothing bad happens. But I have people that help me with it, and so hopefully everything will be okay. And hopefully I'm successful enough at some point that I have enough money to pay whatever comes back to me.
And usually the companies, it's the topic with immigration they usually assist with, because it's a complex one, and
Yes,
it's
for
important
sure.
to have someone locally that will be able to assist with, and that has this, like, world experience about other countries to help and avoid any, like, duplicity payments and things like that.
Yeah,
And then the third part for me, it's the one that I've been working the most, and I think it's the most challenging one, that affects, like, a more emotional, sensitive topic, which is the destination services. When we talk about home search, school search, and specific things like that, that I know that this is the first topic that the person wants to talk when they are going to Brazil, even though we know that we have the immigration, all the important things that you are able to move in, but those are the ones that worries them the most, especially if they have family,
yeah,
because they are worried about where they're gonna live. It's gonna be a safe location or not, because unfortunately, Brazil, we do have some security issues depending on where you are going to live,
yeah.
that we need to discuss with them and they are worried about. So this is the, I think for me, this is the most challenging one, and it's the obvious things for them. This is the main priority. They don't want to talk about the documents for the visa. They don't want to talk about the taxes. They want to talk about where I'm going to live, where my children will be studying.
Who will they be studying with? Yeah,
Exactly. I think those are the main priorities and the ones that they want to focus when they are transferred to another location. So I think when I need to divide about the obvious things about the process, I can tell you, not only preparing the documents, learning the language, things that they are familiar with, but they want to know where they are going to live, where they are going to study. So I think this is the number one priority for a family. When it's someone like alone, it's not so important. There are other things they want to consider, but with families, I can tell you this is the number one subject on our discussion with the families being transferred to Brazil.
yeah, that makes sense. We both have young families,
Yeah.
and so we understand that is a priority of what am I going to do with the little munchkin that's running around, and making sure that he's okay or she's okay, that my partner, if you're bringing a partner, is going to be okay, and find a support system. All things that I think are terribly important. Is there anything in that process that people come surprised at? So you mentioned the need for apostling and translating documents, which Brazil is very much a paper culture still. But are there other things in that process maybe that are worth highlighting that, yeah, generally in the conversation, oh, I didn't know I would need to do that?
One thing that it's something unique in Brazil, I know, it's about the CPF and the scores for the CPF. If you don't know what is CPF, it's a tax number in Brazil, and you need CPF for anything. Like if you want to buy a cell phone chip, you need a CPF. If you want to hire internet connection for your house, you need CPF. But not only needs a CPF, but you also need to have a score with that CPF. So when you arrive in Brazil and then you go to a supermarket and someone asks you, qual é o seu CPF? CPF na nota? It's someone asking for the tax number that they need to put on the system. And once you start using it, you start to get a score. And if you want to hire an internet service, and if you don't do that, you probably will not be approved to hire an internet services. And nowadays, this is increasing a lot. It's been on a discussion. LARM is a part of a group called ABEMI, which is several relocation and immigration companies that they discussed what we can do to improve the process in Brazil. And the number one subject is the CPF, because without a score, you can do anything. Like you are not able to hire internet to work at home. So this is the first thing that we highlight. If you're in Brazil and someone asks for your CPF, yes, if you're in a store, like a liable store, please tell them, because this is going to be important for you afterwards.
It's so shocking to me coming from the US, the CPF, which is the equivalent of the social security number there. I would never tell anybody my social security number. I'm taught not to share it ever. My last four digits, right? That's what you share with somebody. What are the last four digits of your social security number? Here, anywhere you go to a bar and you get a card, they rack up all your drinks and that you pay it the way out. And they'll ask you for your CPF and people give it to them. And I kind of am still weirded out by it. Even after more than 10 years in Brazil, it still seems very strange to me to give my CPF so readily. But I guess you need to. And it is something that's, my understanding is it's not terribly hard to get one. Again, I got one through a relocation expert more than 10 years ago. I couldn't tell you what the process was like, but it's not like in the US as difficult to getting a social security number. It is easier. And I guess you help with that, right?
Yes, we do assist with that. And it's possible in Brazil for you to request it as a non-resident. That means while you are not in Brazil yet with the visa. So that's possible. So once you arrive in the country, you will already have that number, which is really important because that will be related to all the services that you want to hire in the country. So I think it's the number one document that you will be issuing when transferred to Brazil.
And related to that is I know I'm in a number of expat WhatsApp groups because, Brazil, everything's in WhatsApp. And the question is, how do I open up a bank account without a CPF? And it's basically impossible. I think CISACE does it, but they're like the only one. And so there's a lot of questions about how do I get a CPF and needing it for the bank account, which is the next basic thing that I think you need. I don't know if that's what you were going to say, but just kind of relating that you really do need a CPF if you're going to be based here for any sort of time.
Yes, exactly. No, actually, I will talk about the driver's license because this is something that people think that, okay, I will be in Brazil, I can drive, and that's it. With an international permit, I will be able to drive in Brazil. And that's not the case because if you have a driver's license, a valid one from a country that is not part of the Vienna Convention, you are not entitled to drive in Brazil. So you can't do it without moving forward with a regular process as a Brazilian. That means taking all the classes, doing the tests and everything. So this is the first thing. You need to check that because otherwise, if the police stops you, you will be in trouble.
I'm going to need to call you because I still have not gotten mine. I have an American license and I'm entitled to drive for 6 months after every visit. And so,
I will correct you. Not every visit, I can tell you. The first date of entrance with your residence permit. So that means you have only 6 months. After that,
I thought it was,
you need to have a Brazilian one.
But I'm a permanent resident, so I don't have a date of entry unless my date of entry is 10 years ago. Anyway,
Exactly.
This is the side conversation that we can have separately. But I will tell you that I did not originally get a driver's license because they wanted me to surrender my New York driver's license, and it was just a very weird process. But I'm going to call you separately to talk about this because it seems like something that maybe I need to resolve. So this is a very good segue to the next question, which what do you see foreigners struggle with, personal wise and business wise? And so it seems like some of these documents are an issue that I need to correct. But what are some of the other things that you see people struggle with and kind of continuing on this process that people need to go through?
Oh, sure. I would say, personally speaking, it's more about building relationships. I think this is the first thing that they struggle with. And especially if they have a spouse. We have all the research in the area that says the number one cause of failures of assignments is the spouses that accompany the assignee during that process. So if that person finds a job, if that person is able to make friends, to have like daily activities that won't be like staying at home, don't speak in the language by her or himself. So this is the first thing I can tell you that they struggle the most in their personal life. But when you talk about business, I can tell you if they don't have any special discussion about the company's local culture, this is a shock because here in Brazil, things are handled in a different way. You do have the coffee time where it's not about the coffee, it's about getting to know your team, getting to know people inside the office, building relationships. So, this is one important thing. When you talk about feedback, communication, Brazil is not like when you talk about communication, not a direct country. For you to give a hard feedback, you need to be careful about the words that you're going to say. So, depending on the country that you come from, that you are more like, okay, straight to the point, that'd be an issue. And especially when you are in a managerial position, you need to be careful with that because when you need to handle with other people in the team, talking about with your subordinates, this is one thing that it's a challenge, and sometimes that person will not adjust with the local culture and can failure on that job that they came to Brazil to do it. So this is the thing that they need to be careful when moving to Brazil, and I think when they struggle the most, and they sometimes they will end up the assignment a little bit, okay, it was not how I expected to. I was not able to get the numbers that I need to because of the culture and the communication style of the country.
Yeah, I think I've talked about it a few times in previous episodes as well, but the Vale Refeição, the fact that you get a meal voucher from your company and that you're encouraged to go out and have lunch with your colleagues is something that's very different than in a lot of other places. And it's very important to do that, to spend time. Um, I'm curious, and I don't know if this affects the people that you work with, but the move to more remote work and the move to more hybrid work, as you're still relocating people, how they've dealt with that. I don't know if you have any cases that you could talk about on that, but I would imagine that makes the bridging the cultural gap harder.
I will be honest with you, I don't have cases like that that impacted because what we see about the pandemic and the different aspects on the relocation process is more about they changed a lot. For example, they don't have so many business trips, but you keep the assignments and the people that come, especially the number one type of employees that are transferred are technical ones to cover any technical positions. So
Interesting.
usually are people that are on site, they are not staying at home because they are
Right.
coming for a specific activity. So I don't see that as an impact, I can tell you, at least from my side.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how that would go because obviously, if people are going to be remote, you don't necessarily need to even move them. But it's interesting the point you mentioned about the technical people moving here specifically because they have to be on site and really, getting their hands dirty. But coming back, you mentioned some of the culture shock that people deal with when they come here. Are there any other examples of culture shock? So one of the famous ones that I, learned about when I came here very early was, the reputation for terrible service, specifically in Rio. So you go to a bar like Joe B, and they're known for it. They almost do it on purpose now because they're supposed to have the experience of getting terrible service where they ignore you and they're rude and everything else. Are there other elements of culture shock that stand out that you maybe warn your clients about and that you see people coming back to you with feedback? Oh, I didn't know it was going to be this way.
Yes. I think when you talk about services in general, I think this is the most challenging discussions that we have with clients and even to set expectations. Because when you schedule appointments with a service provider, you don't schedule for a specific time. So it's not, okay, I'm going to be at your home between 1 and 2. They schedule, okay, I'm going to be during business hours. So it's from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then this is the first thing when you tell someone, okay, you need to stay at home during business hours, during the whole day, waiting for someone that you don't have any idea at what time they're going to arrive. The first, they say, I'm not going to stay at home. I need to do other things. And there is nothing we can do, even though you call an internet company, I don't know, an electricity company, and ask them, okay, I need you to be there at this specific time. They will say, okay, no, I'm not going to do it. You need to wait. And that's it.
You're giving me flashbacks to cable services in the US. They used to, there's the famous Seinfeld episode where Kramer's trying to cancel his service and he gives them the same thing. I'll be home during business hours, but he's never there. So thanks for the flashbacks.
And luckily, they will arrive. And this is the second part, because the first is to schedule during that time, but luckily they will arrive, or they will contact you at 5:00 p.m. and say, okay, I wasn't able to go to your property. Can I return tomorrow? So this is the first thing. And
2 days now.
exactly. 2 days, if you are lucky. And I think this is the first thing that I can tell you about it. And the other thing that it's a shock is when you have someone going to your property to do any repairs and they say, okay, I need to leave because I need to buy some materials and will return in a couple of minutes. They won't return in a couple of minutes. They will go, have lunch, do something else, and then they will return to your house. So those are the things. I think when we talk about services in general in Brazil, it's a little bit complicated and challenging, especially for dealing with assignees coming from countries like Switzerland, Denmark, Germany. When you have the process and you need to follow that process, for them it's really difficult. They don't understand that, okay, that person told me that they will return, they will do it, but they don't. And it's difficult for you to explain why that happens, because even for us Brazilians, it's a challenge,
Yes.
and it's not something easy to deal with. So I think I would tell you that when you talk about services in general, like all the utilities and internet and everything, it's a challenge for everybody that's coming to Brazil.
So I think this is actually a really nice way to go back to talking about some of the processes for getting people up and set. You'd mentioned getting a driver's license. I imagine there's opening a bank account, getting these services set up. Is there anything else or anything that you'd care to share about how people can navigate those challenges or those life needs?
Perfect. So once they have the house, they are all set up. We also assist with all the services that they need to connect, which means electricity, gas, internet, all those services. We assist with that. Also, sometimes they need to rent some furniture because they have their shipment that will have like 3 or 4 months to arrive in the country, and they need to rent furniture while they are waiting for that. So this is a possibility. Opening a bank account. The driver's license, I can tell you it's an issue, because depending on the city, for example, in Sao Paulo, you are not able to proceed with a driver's license to request one if you don't have any utilities or bank statement under your name with your home address. They don't accept a lease contract as a proof of residence in Brazil. So you need to wait, moving to a permanent property, changing all the bills under your name in order to proceed with the driver's license. So it's a really challenge process, the settling, what we call settling in services. And then we usually assist, and we usually recommend assistance on that, because you will be dealing with people that don't speak the language also. So it's a really hard process. If you come from a country from Latin America that we speak Spanish, it's a little bit easier, but depending on the country that you come from, you need someone to assist you. Contacting the cable TV companies and electricity and etc., because it's difficult for you to request a service schedule and conclude it.
That makes sense. Is there anything else on this element? So, setting up your house, opening bank accounts, is there any complexity to that that people should be aware of it? I think the digital banks have made it really easy for folks these days.
Yeah, usually if you already have the local documents, because for you to be able to work, you need to have your CPF, you need to be registered at the federal police. So once you have all the documents, the process to open a bank account is not so complex, because mostly as we deal with corporates, the companies, they already have banks that they want the employees to open their account, because they will have a special agreement and etc. So
Yeah.
it's not a complex process opening a bank account. The older ones I can highlight as more challenging ones.
How long should people expect once they arrive in Brazil to feel like they're set up?
I will always say like 3 or 4 months. All set up, talking about the house, not talking about like having all things that you can coordinate, organized. When you talk about psychological setup, psychological adjustment, they always say that you need to wait for the first 6 months because it's
Ah,
going to be the
obviously.
period that you have ups and downs until you get established in that country. So I will tell you around 3 to 4 months, because first you need to find a house, secure the house, move to the property, request all the utility services, and that can take from like 1 to 2 months for you to conclude that process, because you need to wait to change, have the first bill. And I will tell you that that's going to be the process. And I'm not considering the driver's license because this is a different subject that we can discuss later, because we are facing several issues in Sao Paulo.
Call you about that one.
Yeah.
That's helpful. I remember I did a youth exchange when I was in high school. I spent a year in Finland, and that was the advice was you'll start to feel like you live there after 6 months. That
Yeah.
the first 2 or 3 months, everything is exciting and new. Then you miss home for 2 or 3 months and nothing is right. I always complain here in Brazil, you don't get good chicken wings. So I'm from upstate New York. I love chicken wings. And so, things like that, are a good deli sandwich. I miss a good Italian mix. So those are the things that you begin to miss. And then after 6 months, you finally have made peace with where you are and you're really living. But I meant more on I think to get through that psychological barrier, also you need the foundational setup of a bank account, you're working, you're in school, you have an apartment, those types of things. And so that's a nice basis to work from, that 3 months. And related to this, and we've talked about this a little bit, but you see a lot of people that visit Brazil, spend 2 weeks in Rio or 2 weeks in Sao Paulo, and this is the greatest country in the world. I need to move there. So, what is the difference between visiting Brazil and living here? What do the folks miss that visit and say they want to do this, or what should they think about before they buy that one-way ticket?
Oh, perfect. So, first of all, when you have a tourist mode and then you have a living mode, which
Yes,
it is, when you are a tourist, you don't pay attention in things that you need to, such as traffic, because you don't have a specific time to arrive, because you don't have a meeting. So, this is the first thing. The second one, you don't have to pay any bills. So, you're not worried about people liking you, getting connections, and things like that, because when you are working, you are worried about people have a good impression, like getting connections at work, making friends, because you will have a long period stay in that country. So there are other things that are important. When you have a due date, you don't worry about. So when you are a tourist, you just want to have fun. You don't want to worry, because you do have a due date, and if something happens, even though it's something huge, you don't worry about, because you know that you are leaving. So
that
when
makes
you
sense.
are staying for a long period, that will be something that, okay, I need to think about it. If I'm gonna live here, if my son is not adjusted, doesn't have friends at school, this is something that will be every night at home discussed, because, okay, should we stay or should we leave? Is my son adjusting at this school? Should I change the schools? Should we return to our country? So those are things that we'll be discussing. If you are staying for a short period, you don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And the traffic's a big piece as well here, that, we started this recording late because I got stuck in traffic. It was supposed to be a 20-minute drive that became over an hour because, choveu fudeu, which is the expression my wife taught me when I first moved to Brazil, that it rains and everything goes wrong. So, on the same note, and I think we've talked around it, but who succeeds in moving to Brazil? What type of people, and what is the necessary mindset for someone to do well here?
Okay, I do have a quote that I separate to read it to you, because I like it. Well, a quote about people that comes to Brazil, about global mobility,
Okay.
that says, living in a foreign culture is like playing a game you've never played before, and for which the rules haven't been explained very well. The challenge is to enjoy the game without missing too many plays, learning the rules, and developing skills as you go along. I think this is it. When you talk about moving to another country, moving to Brazil especially, you need to be open to new experiences.
Yeah.
You have to change a little bit your mindset, like be open that, okay, this is a different culture. I can't compare with my own. I can't compare the host country with my own country. I think those are the ones that succeed, because if we start comparing the place that we're staying for a short period from a place that you have a whole past, a whole history, you have family, you have friends that you built, you will never understand, you'll never get through that culture, that new place. So I think that's it. You need to be open, don't compare, and try to enjoy as much as possible with less control, because it's something that you are not used to, you can control it. I think those are the ones that succeed, because when you start to arguing, comparing, and things like that, you will feel frustrated, because it's never going to be the same. It's never going to be your country where you have your past. So I think that's it. This is my recommendation here, and what I see from the families that I've been assisting during this whole period that I've been working with relocation.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think, people ask me about Brazil, which is obviously why I started this podcast, and it's a country full of contradictions. It's so extreme in so many different ways, and in seemingly contradictory ways, where you have, carnival on one side and very conservative religious movements on the other, and even within the religion, you have kind of the Afro spiritualism entering it as well, and strong rules and strong labor unions, and then a lot of independent workers, which is where my business ties in, all of these different things. And so being open to the contradictory nature of Brazil, I think, is really important. And part of the excitement about being here, at least from my perspective, when companies move people here, what should they understand about that? So, what should they do to help people make the transition easier? How should they think about how that person is going to adapt and how they're going to struggle and where they can be a resource for them? Obviously, to contract Deborah and have her help. But beyond that, what can they do?
Sure. The first thing I always say, you need to allow that person to come to Brazil, as we say, a preview trip, to see the country, to check the location, understand the cost of living of that place, the schools, the type of properties. Those are the things that we always recommend. And also to meet the team. They are gonna be working here in Brazil. So this is the first step that I will recommend to a company prior they proceed with the offer and they accept it. So I think they need to come and see it, because even though we can have several calls and explain about the difference about Brazil, about the culture, about the cost of the houses, that we know that extremely expensive. If you think about a third world country, if they think, okay, Brazil, it's going to be cheap. No, it's not. Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, it's extremely expensive if you are going to look for a property. So I think this is the most important thing for them prior any decision.
Yeah.
And the second one, it is the company should hire and proceed with an intercultural training for them and for the family, so they will be prepared once they arrive about the, if you have a meeting at 3, especially if you have a lunch with someone at 3, they will arrive at 4. At 3 they start getting ready for it. So this is
Maybe.
important. And I can give you an example, because we do have a person that do the intercultural training for us, and every time that she has a meeting with a new family, she arrives late. And then they start to get mad. Okay, why you are late? She said, okay, this is the first thing you need to learn. This is how Brazil works. People will never be on time. So you need to get used with it. So this is one of the things that it's important to do, an intercultural training. And so they will be prepared once I arrive here. And the third recommendation, it is assistance for the spouse. If someone coming with a partner, that person needs assistance. And assistance, I can say, helping looking for a job, or helping looking for communities where that person can enjoy, or a club or something like that, to avoid frustration, to avoid failures. So those are the three recommendations that I have.
Those are really helpful and really great. I think that Brazil is an easy place to have some level of cultural shock. It's just different than what you think it is. I don't know. Sometimes I get asked by people, and I ask people as well, what were your expectations, or what did you have? And you don't always know what to expect with Brazil. People see soccer and the Amazon and things like that, but they don't realize the size of it and all of the complexity that it brings. But kind of heading towards the end, I was going to ask you, I think it's really interesting that I imagine that your job moving people to Brazil is a really nice indicator of the state of Brazil, of what's happening, of what's big, of what's getting big, in terms of who you're dealing with and how you're dealing with them. What types of professionals are you seeing? So, what are the trends that you're seeing just based on who your clients are and who you're dealing with?
Okay, I can tell you based on data, and there is a really nice survey called Mobility Brazil done by an interculturalist called Andrea Fuchs. She does annually. She discusses with HRs about the employees, the type of the positions that they are assuming here in Brazil and everything. And I can tell you that 26% of people transferred to Brazil, they are technical positions to cover any technical gap. So as I mentioned previously, so this is the first one.
Makes sense.
And the second one, 17% is for managerial positions. So those are the main transferees that we have in Brazil. And I can tell you not only based on LARM, but considering all the HRs and all the companies that transfer expatriates to the country. And this is a sad actually number because this is a reflection about the gaps that we have in the country and about education and preparation of the employees and everything. So unfortunately, we have that, but at the same time it's an opportunity for us to have people from all over the world to have discussions, and we have this exchange like about culture and
Yeah, you learn a lot from having different types of managers.
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, I am an American doing this podcast, but I've lived in a lot of places and I learn a tremendous amount going to different cultures and meeting different people. It's an opportunity for self reflection and obviously also learning from other people about other types of habits and other ways of doing things. Are there any trends you see in terms of industries that are growing or industries that are shrinking? I don't know what you can share also based on, I imagine that your client list is private, but if there's any kind of general trends that you see about Brazil, what's popular these days or what's Brazil getting known for?
What I can tell you that the companies that we used to work in the past, the more traditional ones, the number of assignments are reducing a lot, and then we see a number of people coming to work to startups that it's growing in Brazil like huge.
Amazing.
So we see that the companies that we've been working from the past, and now there is a change on the number of assignments that we have. Like the number one company, which used to be our biggest client, is not anymore. We see another one that is a newer company, a startup that is growing in the country. So are the things that we see it in the changes in the market. I can go through like some details due confidentiality, but
I'm curious here, and you might not have an answer. Is that a reflection on the traditional businesses maybe having succeeded a little bit in filling those traditional gaps in the managerial piece that you just talked about versus a need for new types of skills at startups? Or am I misreading it and it's just a shift in the economy or both?
I think both. And one of the things, it's about the generation. When you talk about startups, you have more a young generation that it's coming and they are asking for also to move to another country, to work, to have different opportunities, to learn different cultures. So that gives that companies an exchange of people working in different countries that you don't have like more traditional, because you have people that it's been working there for 20, 13 years, 15 years, that it's already set in that position in that specific location. And in startups you have a different generation that wants to have that opportunity. And this is something that I can say in the market, and it's changing a lot. You see a lot of people asking, we call that local hires, they are asking to be hired in a different location. So I think that also impact the number of assignments in the startups in comparison to the traditional, let's say, companies.
That makes sense. Is there anything that I haven't asked that is really important that you mention in terms of people moving to Brazil or companies moving people to Brazil before I kind of give you my general last couple of questions here?
I think the first thing is it's not about only taking a decision, okay, that person is important for that role. You need to understand that person personality as well to see if it's someone that will fit, if it has this global mobility intelligence, as we say, to be adjusted in a different country. Because even though it's an expert in something, sometimes that person will not adjust to a different culture. So this will avoid failures in the process, because problems with federal police, immigration, challenges, that's something that will always happen. Doesn't matter if you are open or not, it can happen. Unfortunately, it's something that sometimes you don't have control. But knowing the person that you're going to transfer, that will make the life of that company like easier. And
Yeah.
even for that person that will be living in a different country, it will be not like something traumatic, it will be an easier process. So I think they need to take a look deeply on the personality, and if that person is open to different cultures and understanding a little bit more psychologically speaking than about technical topics. I know that it involves lots of things in the background and money and other things, but I think this is really important to avoid
Yeah.
failures and then expanding a huge amount, transferring someone, and then a couple of months later needing to bring that person back to the home country.
Yeah, I would just say it makes a lot of sense. Heading to the last couple questions here that I always ask people. The name of the podcast is the famous quote by Tom Jobim, Brazil is not for beginners. What does that mean to you? I don't know if you share it with your clients when they move here, if it's something you're regularly saying. It's something that I've heard numerous times and why I chose it for the name of the podcast. But what does that mean to you?
I would say that even though I believe that not only Brazil, but relocating to any country is not for beginners, I can say that Brazil, it's a continental country. You were saying previously about the size of Brazil, the difference of the culture in the states, in the city.
Yeah.
So we have this diversity in the country. I think this makes the country not for beginners because it's not about culture, it's about processes as well. I was telling about the driver's license. I think this is the first topic here, and everybody will be scared when they come to Brazil about the driver's license. But I can tell you that the process that we have in São Paulo is not the process that I have in Campinas, which is the countryside of São Paulo, which is not the same as the process in Rio. It's not the same in Porto Alegre. In Salvador, also, it's not the same. So you have processes that are different in all the cities in the country, even the federal police. The papers that you need to have your RNM, as you have in Sao Paulo, if you go to Rio, I can tell you because I had a case recently. We went to Rio. Okay, can you please confirm? We always like to double check because they change a lot. The
Yeah.
first person said, okay, no, those are not the documents. You need this, and that, which are different than Sao Paulo. And then the second person in a second day told, no, it's not that. You will need this additional document. So you have this complexity about the processes that are different in the whole country, that if you don't have someone to help you locally, you will struggle with that. And then the companies, especially that have unities in different locations in the country, for them to standardize their processes, it's a little bit complex. So this is why I will tell you that's why Brazil is not for beginners.
Yeah, I just renewed my RNM, and there were 3 levels of triage before I even got to the place I needed to go. You walk into the building and somebody takes your paper, and then they give you another piece of paper, but have you go to the next line where they give you a different piece of paper. And everybody goes through all 3, but it's 3 levels of triage. It doesn't seem to make sense why it's 3 different stations and 3 different people, that it could have all just been one. But I don't know. It's Brazil. It's not for beginners, like I said, and there's extra complexity, and people like paper.
Exactly.
And then just as a last question here, what is you've shared a number already, and I think it's been the main idea of this conversation, but is there an expression or a habit or something that you like to highlight for foreigners? I always come back to the same one that, when my wife was pregnant, her stomach didn't belong to her, it belonged to everybody. And strangers would come up to her in the supermarket and touch her stomach, which is shocking for an American. But is there anything else, people like to share quotes sometimes. Is there anything that you'd like to share that foreigners don't get right away or that you think would make sense to share with them?
Sure. There is one that I like a lot, which is pois não, because it's not for all countries. But if you're talking about with a Spanish speaker, if you say pois não, it's a hardly no. But for us, it's like, please go ahead. Tell me what you want. So you go to the bank and someone say, okay, pois não, how can I help you? It's like, pois não, you are not going to help me. Why? I'm here to open a bank account and that's it. So this is one that I like the most. I heard some of your podcasts, and there is an article from The Economist called like a manual for foreigners should translate Brazilians.
Okay.
And then there are some quotes like, if a Brazilian say no, someone from another country will understand as no. And what Brazilian was saying, like, it's never, like in a million years that I'm going to do that. It's like a hardly no for sure. I like this one. And then the other one is, if a Brazilian say yes, you will understand yes. But there are several meanings, but yes, they would never do that. And then you have other ones like maybe, you understand maybe, and for a Brazilian, it's a no.
Yeah.
There are a huge list I can share with you later because it's a really great article. I like it.
That's awesome. No, please send it to me. I'll make sure to share it when I post the episode. The quote from Fekkaloi where she said that in Brazil, a yes is a maybe and a maybe is a no is one of my favorites for sure. I think it really gets to the essence of how things work here. Débora, thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun. I need to call you for some help, it sounds, but we will talk afterwards about that. How can listeners reach you if they would like to learn more or engage with you for your services?
Oh, sure. They can go on Instagram at LARM Brazil, or in LinkedIn, they can look for LARM Brazil. And I will be really happy to help you. And anyone that's coming to Brazil or have any questions about our country, it will be a pleasure to assist.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me again. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope this was as much fun to listen to as it was to record.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks again for joining us. This podcast was hosted by me, Isaac Matzner. It was produced by Amanda Villela and edited by Veronica Medina. You can find more episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as on our Substack page. We love feedback, so please feel free to reach out to us on social media or via email at Brazil4beginners@gmail.com.